Christianity, a faith embraced by billions, hinges on a concept both profound and perplexing: sacrificial atonement. This doctrine, woven into the very fabric of Christian theology, asserts a stark truth: humanity stands guilty before a righteous God. Our transgressions, our failures to meet divine standards create a chasm between us and the divine. But there is hope, a bridge built upon sacrifice. This idea resonates deeply within Christian tradition. It's not merely a theological footnote, but a central tenet, a pillar upon which the entire edifice of faith rests. To comprehend Christianity, one must grapple with the weight of sacrifice, its centrality to the relationship between humanity and God. This concept, however, is not without its critics. Some view it as a relic of a bygone era, a primitive notion incompatible with a loving God. The questions raised are as old as faith itself. Why would a benevolent deity demand such a steep price for reconciliation? Is this the hallmark of a merciful God, or does it hint at something more unsettling? To unravel this complex tapestry, we must journey back to the ancient roots of sacrificial atonement, exploring its origins and evolution. Only then can we truly grasp its enduring power and confront the unsettling questions it raises about the nature of God and the price of forgiveness. The roots of sacrificial atonement stretch back millennia, entwined with the ancient practice of offering sacrifices to appease deities. Across cultures and throughout history, the ritualistic spilling of blood, the offering of life itself, has held profound religious significance. In ancient Israel, this practice found its way into the very heart of religious observance, enshrined within the pages of the Torah. Leviticus, a book within the Hebrew Bible, lays bare the intricate system of sacrifices ordained by God. Animals, carefully chosen and meticulously prepared, were offered on altars as atonement for sin. The blood, considered sacred, served as a potent symbol of life offered and appeased. These rituals were not mere formality. They were deemed essential for maintaining a right relationship with Yahweh, the God of Israel. These ancient practices provide the historical and theological backdrop against which the Christian understanding of sacrifice unfolds. It's within this context that the life and death of Jesus take on cosmic significance. The echoes of ancient altars resonate through the Gospels, culminating in a sacrifice of unimaginable magnitude. To comprehend the Christian concept of atonement, we must first grapple with the raw, visceral nature of sacrifice as understood by our ancestors in faith. In the Gospel of John, John the Baptist, a prophetic figure shrouded in camel hair and fiery pronouncements, utters words that would forever alter the course of human history. Gazing upon Jesus, he proclaims, "Behold, the Lamb of God, who takes away the sin of the world." This declaration, laden with theological weight, casts Jesus in a new light, not merely as a prophet or teacher, but as the embodiment of sacrifice itself. The image is striking, even unsettling. The Lamb, a creature associated with innocence and gentleness, becomes a symbol of divine atonement. Jesus, the Lamb of God, is destined not for a life of earthly comfort, but for a sacrificial death, a fate foretold in the ancient scriptures. This concept, deeply rooted in Jewish tradition, finds its ultimate fulfillment in the person of Christ. He becomes the ultimate sacrifice, the embodiment of love poured out for a humanity desperately in need of redemption. This is the cornerstone of Christian belief, that through Jesus' death, the chasm separating humanity from God is bridged. But this bridge, built upon the sacrifice of the Son of God, raises profound questions. Is this the only path to reconciliation? And what does this demand for sacrifice say about the nature of God himself? The sacrifice of Jesus is not merely a historical event, it is the bedrock of Christian theology. It's believed to be the ultimate act of love, the linchpin in God's plan for humanity's redemption. Through Christ's death, sin, which had separated humanity from a holy God, is atoned for. The bridge between the divine and the human, once shattered by disobedience, is rebuilt with the very lifeblood of the Son of God. This act is understood as both necessary and sufficient. Necessary because humanity, mired in sin, is incapable of bridging the gap on its own. Sufficient because Christ's sacrifice is deemed a perfect and complete offering, satisfying the demands of divine justice. This concept, however, is not without its complexities and challenges. Critics argue that it portrays a deity who demands appeasement through violence, a God who requires the suffering of the innocent to forgive the guilty. Is this the mark of a loving and merciful God, or does it suggest a deity more concerned with power and retribution? These questions cut to the very heart of the Christian faith, challenging believers to reconcile the image of a loving God with the demand for such a costly sacrifice. To grapple with these questions, we must delve deeper into the implications of this doctrine, exploring its ethical and theological nuances. Only then can we begin to understand the profound impact of sacrificial atonement on the Christian worldview and its implications for how we understand the nature of God, the meaning of suffering, and the very possibility of forgiveness. The concept of blood sacrifice is deeply embedded within the Christian scriptures, establishing its perceived necessity for atonement. In Hebrews chapter 9, verse 22, we encounter a striking declaration: "Without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness." This verse succinctly encapsulates the theological framework underpinning sacrificial atonement. Blood, symbolizing life, becomes the currency for reconciliation, a powerful and unsettling notion. This scriptural mandate is not an isolated doctrine, but is woven throughout the biblical narrative. From the sacrifices detailed in Leviticus to the ultimate sacrifice of Jesus Christ, the shedding of blood is portrayed as essential for the remission of sins. The Old Testament rituals involving the blood of animals set a precedent for understanding the gravity of sin and the cost of forgiveness. However, this raises profound questions about the nature of God and the necessity of such violent means for reconciliation. If God is omnipotent and capable of infinite mercy, why would he require bloodshed to forgive sins? This apparent contradiction suggests a more complex and perhaps troubling aspect of divine justice. Critics argue that this requirement reflects a deity demanding appeasement through violence, challenging the image of a loving and merciful God. The necessity of blood sacrifice, therefore, not only underscores the seriousness of sin, but also presents a paradox that has intrigued and troubled theologians for centuries. The notion that an omnipotent and merciful God would necessitate bloodshed for forgiveness is a paradox that warrants deep exploration. On one hand, the Christian faith celebrates God's boundless mercy and love. On the other, it asserts the indispensable need for a gruesome sacrifice to reconcile humanity with the divine. This dichotomy is perplexing and raises significant theological and ethical questions. If God possesses the power to forgive without limit, as Christians believe, why then is blood sacrifice indispensable? This requirement seems to contradict the very essence of divine love and mercy. One might argue that true mercy would not demand such a violent act, but would rather extend forgiveness freely, without the need for bloodshed. The argument here centers on the incongruity between the image of a loving deity and the brutal means required for atonement. The demand for blood sacrifice could be perceived as reflecting a need for retribution or satisfaction of divine justice, rather than genuine mercy. This perspective challenges the traditional understanding of God's nature in Christianity. This paradox invites believers to reconsider the characteristics attributed to God. Does the necessity of bloodshed reveal a more complex and perhaps less benevolent nature of the divine? By questioning these fundamental aspects, we can delve deeper into the ethical and theological implications of sacrificial atonement. Beyond the theological paradox, the requirement of blood sacrifice can also be interpreted as a mechanism of control and submission within the divine economy. This perspective suggests that such demands serve to reinforce God's authority and the subjugation of humanity. By necessitating bloodshed for forgiveness, this framework portrays a deity who requires submission through violent means. This interpretation aligns with the broader narrative of sacrifice as a means of appeasing deities found in various ancient cultures. In the context of Christianity, the sacrificial death of Jesus can be seen as the ultimate act of submission to God's will, reinforcing his supreme authority. The act of sacrifice becomes a powerful tool for maintaining control over humanity, ensuring adherence to divine commandments through the most extreme measures. Critics argue that this need for control contradicts the portrayal of God as an all-loving and merciful being. Instead, it paints a picture of a deity who demands absolute submission, even to the point of requiring the life of his own son. This perspective challenges believers to reconcile the notion of a loving God with the apparent need for domination and control. Moreover, this need for blood sacrifice as a means of control and submission reflects human constructs of power and authority imposed upon the divine. It suggests that the concept of atonement may be more about human interpretations of justice and order than about the inherent nature of God. This raises further questions about the origins and implications of sacrificial atonement within the Christian faith. The portrayal of God as requiring blood sacrifice for atonement has significant implications for our understanding of the divine character. If God necessitates such violent means for forgiveness, it suggests a deity more aligned with power and retribution than with love and mercy. This depiction can profoundly affect how believers perceive morality, justice, and the nature of God himself. One crucial implication is the impact on human ethics and justice. If divine justice demands the brutal punishment of the innocent, like Jesus, for the guilty, it sets a troubling precedent for human justice systems. It raises the question of whether such a model is ethical or just, and how it reflects on the moral guidance provided by religious teachings. Furthermore, this depiction of God as violent and retributive can affect how believers view their relationship with the divine. It may foster a sense of fear and subservience rather than love and trust. The emphasis on bloodshed and sacrifice can overshadow the aspects of faith that promote compassion, forgiveness, and mercy. Ultimately, the necessity of blood sacrifice challenges believers to critically examine their theology and its implications. It invites a deeper reflection on the nature of God, the meaning of atonement, and the ethical dimensions of sacrificial practices. By confronting these questions, one can gain a more nuanced understanding of the Christian faith and its portrayal of God. This exploration of sacrificial atonement and the necessity of blood sacrifice is not merely an academic exercise. It has profound implications for how we understand divine justice, mercy, and the very essence of God. As we delve deeper into these complexities, we are challenged to reconcile the violent aspects of atonement with the foundational belief in a loving and merciful deity. The Christian faith proclaims that God sent his only Son, Jesus, to die for humanity's sins. This act is seen as the ultimate expression of love. Yet, could it be more about God's need for adoration and obedience? This perspective challenges the traditional interpretation of God's sacrifice. Jesus' crucifixion is seen as the ultimate act of obedience, a testament to God's power and authority. This narrative reinforces a hierarchical power structure, demanding complete submission and adoration. It implies God's love is conditional, a transaction, rather than a freely given gift. This challenges us to confront the possibility that the demand for sacrifice stems from a need for validation and control. The traditional Christian narrative presents Jesus' sacrifice as the ultimate act of mercy, a loving God extending grace to a fallen humanity. However, when we scrutinize this narrative through the lens of divine narcissism, a different interpretation emerges. Could it be that the concept of sacrifice masks a more self-serving motive, a means for God to assert his authority and demand unwavering adoration? The very notion that an omnipotent being requires a blood sacrifice to forgive implies a limitation to his power. It suggests that God is bound by a system of justice that necessitates retribution, even if it means sacrificing his own Son. This raises questions about the true nature of God's mercy. Is it genuine compassion, or is it a calculated act designed to elicit gratitude and obedience? Furthermore, the emphasis on sacrifice as the sole path to salvation can be seen as a manipulative tactic. It instills a sense of fear and obligation, prompting believers to strive for an unattainable standard of righteousness. This constant striving for approval can create a toxic cycle of guilt and shame, ultimately serving to reinforce God's position of power and control. By unmasking the potential narcissism embedded within this narrative, we begin to see that the concept of sacrificial atonement, rather than a testament to God's love, might be a tool for maintaining control and demanding unwavering devotion. This perspective challenges us to critically examine the true nature of divine mercy and its implications for our understanding of God. Are we worshiping a God inherently worthy of adoration, or one who demands it? Does true love require such a costly display of power and control? This framework positions believers in a perpetual state of indebtedness, striving to earn a love that should be freely given. Ultimately, scrutinizing sacrificial atonement through the lens of divine narcissism challenges us to reevaluate our understanding of God. The heart of sacrificial atonement rests upon a deeply unsettling premise. An innocent individual, Jesus Christ, is punished for the sins of the guilty masses. This framework, while central to Christian theology, raises profound ethical questions that challenge our fundamental understanding of justice. Can we accept a system of divine justice that contradicts the principles of fairness and equity in our human legal systems? In human courts, punishing the innocent for the guilty is deemed abhorrent, a violation of basic human rights. Our legal systems are founded upon the principle that each individual is responsible for their own actions. Yet sacrificial atonement proposes a system where divine justice operates outside these ethical boundaries. This dissonance between human and divine justice creates a moral quandary for believers. How can we reconcile the belief in a just and loving God with a system that seemingly contradicts our fundamental understanding of fairness? The very act of transferring guilt and punishment onto an innocent party challenges our moral compass. This raises concerns about the moral framework upon which Christianity is built. If God condones the punishment of the innocent, what message does that send about the nature of morality itself? Does it imply that divine justice transcends human understanding? Or does it suggest a more troubling disconnect between the values we ascribe to God and the ethical principles we strive for in our own lives? The image of Jesus as the Lamb of God evokes innocence, purity, and vulnerability. How can a loving God demand the brutal sacrifice of his own Son? Jesus' suffering emphasizes the enormous cost of atonement. This raises unsettling questions about divine love and justice. The ethical dilemma of punishing the innocent juxtaposes divine justice with human morality. Our sense of fairness dictates accountability for one's actions, not transferring blame. Sacrificial atonement proposes a divine system outside human ethics. This raises concerns about moral authority's source and validity. If God is the ultimate moral source, how do we reconcile his actions with our justice? This contradiction forces believers to confront their understanding of right and wrong. Some argue God operates on a higher moral plane beyond human comprehension. This raises questions about divine justice's relevance to our earthly existence. If God's actions are beyond scrutiny, what guidance can we glean? The conflict between human morality and divine justice underscores the complex relationship between faith and reason. It challenges us to examine our beliefs and grapple with ethical implications. This tension forces us to question our ethical frameworks. It compels us to seek a deeper understanding of how divine principles coexist with our sense of justice. Substitutionary atonement, where Jesus takes humanity's punishment, raises ethical concerns about shifting guilt onto an innocent party. This can imply individuals aren't responsible for their actions, fostering moral complacency. It also suggests divine mercy is transactional, undermining grace as a free gift. Examining this concept challenges us to confront the ethical implications of such a system. The concept of sacrificial atonement presents a profound theological paradox when considering God's attribute of omnipotence. If God is truly all-powerful, why would he require a sacrifice to reconcile humanity to himself? This question challenges believers to reconcile the notion of an all-powerful God who demands a sacrifice. The necessity of sacrifice raises questions about the internal consistency of Christian theology. This paradox can serve as a catalyst for deeper theological reflection. The need for any sacrifice, especially Jesus Christ's, implies a constraint on God's power, contradicting omnipotence. If God is all-powerful, forgiveness should be possible without such drastic measures. This suggests a limitation on God's ability to act freely. If God cannot forgive without sacrifice, what limits him? Is it a cosmic law or an aspect of his nature? Or is God's power not as absolute as believed? The notion of a sacrifice, particularly a blood sacrifice, speaks more to appeasement than to true forgiveness. It suggests that God's wrath needs to be quelled through a symbolic act of retribution. This paints a picture of God as a demanding ruler requiring a blood offering. Is this truly forgiveness or a transactional exchange? True forgiveness is an act of grace, freely given without expectation. It values the relationship more than the transgression itself. The concept of sacrificial atonement, emphasizing a blood sacrifice to appease God, serves to maintain a specific power structure within the Christian faith. It establishes humanity as inherently flawed, needing redemption through this divinely ordained sacrifice. This framework can be used to control and manipulate, justifying suffering and oppression. The convenience of sacrificial atonement provides a simple answer to complex existential questions. God's love transcends transactional appeasement, offering forgiveness freely and unconditionally. Imagine a God whose love and forgiveness are boundless. This love is not a reward for good behavior, nor withheld as punishment. It is a constant, unwavering force that permeates all existence. Forgiveness is not a transaction, but a transformation. It heals rifts within ourselves and our relationships. Embrace a faith rooted in love, acceptance, and grace. The Old Testament establishes a covenant between God and humanity, cemented in blood. Animal sacrifice was central to ancient Israelite culture. Leviticus mandates atonement for sins through bloodshed. These sacrifices maintained a right relationship with Yahweh. Blood sacrifice reflected God's just and demanding nature. Animal blood symbolized the covenant's cost. It represented sin's weight and the need for atonement. This system provided a framework for understanding sin. It emphasized the seriousness of transgressing divine law. Bloodshed reminded of the stakes in maintaining a right relationship with God. This understanding lays the groundwork for the Christian interpretation of Jesus' death. It establishes continuity between the Old and New Testaments, suggesting the need for atonement transcends time. The New Testament introduces a radical shift. Jesus, the Lamb of God, becomes the ultimate sacrifice, surpassing all previous ones. His death signifies a new covenant, focusing on internal transformation and faith. This act of love reconciles humanity to God, emphasizing grace over law. Does the shift from Old to New Testament represent a change in God's character or tactics? Hosea suggests God desires a contrite heart over sacrifices. Is this a more effective way to achieve redemption? Theologians debate if God's nature is unchanging or evolving. Some argue Old Testament sacrifices pointed to Christ. Others see a shift towards compassion and mercy. This debate impacts how we understand and apply the Bible today. The New Testament presents a higher standard for believers, emphasizing internal transformation over external rituals. Jesus' teachings challenge legalistic interpretations, calling for love, forgiveness, and selflessness. This new covenant demands a transformation of the heart, aligning with God's character. It calls us to examine our hearts and allow God's love to transform us. This transformation offers true freedom, genuine love, and lasting reconciliation with God. The concept of sacrificial atonement casts a long shadow over our understanding of God. The image of a deity demanding blood sacrifice to reconcile with humanity is difficult to reconcile with a loving God. This dissonance prompts us to question whether sacrificial atonement reflects the divine nature or human need for order. The violence inherent in the sacrificial system raises uncomfortable questions about the character of God. Is this truly a God of love, or one more concerned with power and retribution? This question has haunted theologians for centuries, leading to countless interpretations of Christ's death. Some argue the violence of sacrifice conveys the gravity of sin, while others see it as a primitive relic. This tension challenges us to confront the uncomfortable aspects of our faith and grapple with our understanding of God. Ultimately, the question of whether sacrificial atonement points to a God of violence or a misunderstood love is personal. There is no single interpretation that fully encompasses the complexity of this doctrine and its implications. Regardless of how one interprets the theological implications of sacrificial atonement, its impact on human history and culture is undeniable. The shadow of sacrifice looms large, shaping our understanding of justice, morality, and the relationship between humanity and the divine. From the blood sacrifices of ancient cultures to the modern-day concept of martyrdom, the idea that atonement requires a price, often paid in suffering and death, continues to influence our thoughts, actions, and beliefs. This enduring influence is evident in the countless narratives, myths, and rituals that depict sacrifice as a necessary component of redemption. The hero's journey often involves a sacrificial act, a willingness to face death or endure great suffering for the sake of a greater good. This theme resonates deeply within the human psyche, suggesting a primal understanding of the relationship between sacrifice and redemption. However, the shadow of sacrifice can also manifest in darker ways. The history of religion is replete with examples of violence and oppression justified in the name of a higher power. Human sacrifice, religious wars, and persecution of those deemed heretical are all too common examples of how the concept of sacrificial atonement can be twisted and distorted to serve nefarious ends. The challenge for modern believers is to disentangle the positive aspects of sacrifice, selflessness, compassion, and a willingness to put the needs of others before our own, from the more problematic aspects that can lead to violence, intolerance, and a distorted understanding of God's justice and mercy. Reimagining the divine invites us to embrace a faith grounded in grace, recognizing the inherent worth of every human being. This vision calls us to move beyond transactional faith and embrace God's boundless love and grace. It is a deepening of faith, not a departure from it. While the debate surrounding sacrificial atonement is likely to continue for centuries to come, one thing remains clear: the heart of the Christian message, the message at the core of Jesus' teachings, is a message of love, compassion, and forgiveness. Whether we interpret Christ's death as a blood sacrifice to appease God's wrath, or as an act of selfless love that reveals the true nature of the divine, we are called to embody these values in our own lives. The challenge for us, as individuals and as a global community, is to move beyond the theological debates and embrace the radical call to love our neighbors as ourselves, to forgive those who have wronged us, and to extend grace and compassion to all, even those we deem unworthy. This is the true legacy of the Christian faith, a legacy that transcends the boundaries of doctrine and dogma, a legacy that speaks to the deepest longings of the human heart, the longing for connection, for meaning, and for a love that has the power to heal, to reconcile, and to transform. This is a call to action, an invitation to live out the radical love and compassion that lie at the heart of the Christian message. It is a call to build bridges of understanding, to tear down walls of division, and to create a world where the shadow of sacrifice no longer looms large, but where the light of love shines brightly.
If you enjoy our content, we'd love your support. By joining one of our channel memberships, you help us continue creating videos like this one while gaining access to some amazing perks. As a member, you'll unlock exclusive content available only to supporters, earn loyalty badges to show off in comments and live chats, and enjoy priority responses to your comments, shoutouts, and more. The best part? Memberships start at just $2.99 a month, less than a cup of coffee. Even small contributions make a big difference for the PJ Bible TV team in covering production costs and delivering the content you love. And if you're not ready to become a channel member today but still want to support us, there are other ways to help. Engaging with our videos is a tremendous way to show your support. By taking just a few moments to like the video, share it with friends, family, or on social media, and leave a comment, you're telling the YouTube algorithm to share our content with more people. Your support, no matter how you choose to show it, means the world to us. Thank you for being part of the PJ Bible TV community.